Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Go San Diego here, along with Isha Azim from Racing with Isha. We have a lot to talk about today. Very exciting show. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show, Mark, Robert, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. Each and every month, you two can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee and Super Chat. And if you don't see us live on the air, there's a thank you button where you can still contribute to us. And of course, easy way, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Don't miss any of our programs. Isha, we got a big weekend of cross racing. I see a comment in the chat room already from one of our regulars. Super Saturday leading to Super Sunday. Yes, this is going to be, I think, a big race indeed. So one of the big things I got to say, Isha, when it comes to today's racing, we have the Bass Pro Shop night race at Bristol for the NASCAR Cup Series. We got the Sandown 500 and Formula One. That's going to be very exciting. We'll start with NASCAR Cup Series.
Yeah, Joe, starting with NASCAR, as you mentioned, we have the Bass Pro Shop night race at Bristol tonight. Saturday night, under the lights, and the final race of the first round of the playoffs is here. So, four drivers are currently facing elimination from the playoffs, and one of them is Martin Truex Jr. So, Martin Truex Jr. is 7 points below the cut line, and he could be the first number one seed to be eliminated. His record at Bristol could be better for him, and not counting the dirt races, in his last 16 finishes at Bristol, he has had 0 top 5 finishes, 2 top 10 finishes, and 9 finishes of 21 or worse. His last top 5 finish was over a decade ago, back in 2011, with Michael Waltrip Racing. So, Joe, do you predict Truex will advance to the round of 12?
It's looking, he has a tough road when you look at what happens with his race results at this track. The big thing, though, is when you look at the starting grid, he is at a good spot right there in the top 5. But this is Bristol. Anything can happen at this short track. It's not as wild and unpredictable as what we see in Talladega, but overall, this is a track. If there's trouble on turn 3 and you're coming out of turn 2, you're going so fast you could get caught up in that mess. For Martin Truex Jr., compare him to the other drivers below the cut line, he has the easiest route. But the big thing, he has to try to get around a couple drivers. 7 points, that's 7 positions. The stage points will help if he gets them. But overall, if I was Martin Truex Jr., I got to put on the face of confidence for the team. If you are going out to track feeling confident about this race weekend, ignoring the past that you haven't been that great here, your last top 5 finish, 2011. If the team's behind you and if you have a good attitude, I think you have a good race. Big thing, race your own race and avoid the trouble.
Definitely, Joe. And, along with Martin Truex Jr., we have another Toyota driver below the cut line, and that is Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace is 19 points behind the cut line. He is starting from 9th place, and Michael McDowell is 40 points below the cut line, and he is starting from 4th place. Now, the only driver below the cut line who is not starting in the top 10 is Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So, Joe, out of the 4 drivers below the cut line, who do you think will have the hardest path to advancing into the round of 12?
The hardest paths were around 12. Easily, that has to go to Michael McDowell. I know he is starting in the top 10. That's always great. But that team, I don't see them potentially executing the perfect race where they could go out there, get the stage points, because you're going to need stage points, and then go out there and try to win. Because even with the stage points, if you're looking at the 20 stage points, you're still 40 points below the cut line. So that only cuts it down to half. 20 positions, unless you could see the other drivers ahead of you. Realistically, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., you could gain on. Bubba Wallace, you need him to go out literally the first lap, be last, and Truex have a bad race. He has a really tough road. He is in a must-win situation. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., unfortunately, with that Chevrolet team, I just don't see them having the potential to move on. They just seem too far behind off the pace. I know he had a pretty solid run here the last time, but of course, that was a dirt race. No dirt this time. Short track racing, he's somewhat decent at it. I just don't see him advancing on. But at the end, Michael McDowell, if he could pull this off, that'll be the biggest upset in the NASCAR playoffs.
Definitely, Joe. I think he's going to have a tough time. But, if we look at a driver who is above the cut line but could also be seeing some potential trouble, we have Christopher Bell. For the third week in a row, he has earned the pole. He has a 23rd and 8th place finish in the first two races. He is 13 points above the cut line, so he is a safe bet to advance into the round of 12. But how do you think the 20 teams should approach the race tonight?
The 20 team, overall, they just got to go out there, run their own race. No point in being worried about who's ahead of you, who's behind you, especially Truex, Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is far enough where he essentially has to have the top runs in the two stages finish ahead of Christopher Bell. I don't think that's going to happen if Christopher Bell has a good race. The pit crew, this is the pit crew Ty Gibbs had, the best pit crew. They started the playoffs. He gets the best pit crew. That's fair game. But that pit crew has not done their job. They have to step it up. They have to be doing what they were doing for Ty and to do that for Christopher Bell. We know this is not going to be a caution-free race. So those pit stops under yellow, they're going to be very important for that 20 team to execute. And Christopher Bell himself, he cannot make a mistake. He has to go out there, get essentially towards the front for all the stage points, stay up front. If you fall behind, depending on what stage of the race we are, if we're in that low groove early on or that high groove above later on in the race, you got to have a car and be on the limit, stay on the limit, because at the end of the day, Christopher Bell, I feel pretty confident he will make it out into the next round, but he cannot screw up. He cannot rely on what he did last year of winning in must-win situations.
Yeah, Joe. And before we continue, I know we've got some comments in the chat room, so let's take a look at those. So Adam says, if you've never been to Bristol Motor Speedway, put it on your bucket list. It's incredible, crazy, and just awesome. And a day in the life, they say, biggest playoff upset or a joke, the playoffs if Martin is out.
I would say if Martin Truex is eliminated from this race, I would say it's the biggest upset. I wouldn't exactly call it a joke. I know there's been a lot of discussion about, should the regular season champion not be in a situation where they could be out after one round, three bad races. And overall, I do feel like if there was a 25-point bonus, make that bonus bigger rather than 15, Truex, he'll be above the cut line. Now, some people think a first round bye. That could work, but then what does that really do for the three races? Just try to pad on the points, go for the wins, and that's it? I'm sort of a little bit torn between both sides. I think it would be more of a big upset. I know Ben feels like this is something more of a joke when it comes to the number one seed, but that's something where I think you see this in the NCAA March Madness. A number one seed could go out to the 16th seed first game and it's over. One loss, you're done. I just think it's something where NASCAR, if they feel like it's the biggest upset, keep it there. If they feel like it's becoming a little bit of a joke, adjust it to where you don't have the number one seed being so easily eliminated.
Now, Joe, taking a look at Bristol, we know it's no ordinary short track. It has 34 degrees of banking, and we saw Kyle Larson get loose on lap one, ruining his qualifying effort and starting 36th. The pole time was 15.109 seconds, and Larson was 15.81, and the sixth tenth of a second separated all 36 drivers. So in the past, we've seen 6 different winners in the last 6 running of the Bristol night race. 7 past winners at Bristol are in the field today. All 7 are in the playoffs. So, Joe, who is on your short list for winning the Bristol night race?
On my short list, I'm looking at a couple of drivers when it comes to winning this race. One of the big drivers, and I'm very surprised. I don't believe I was saying this at the beginning of the year. Brad Keselowski is on my list, and I could see Dana Life is predicting Brad Keselowski is going to win too. Overall, this race, the favorites to go out there and win, they have won in the past. I think they'll go out there and win again, most likely. It's too chaotic for a first-time winner quite often. You have to run a good race. You have to have a good picker. You got to avoid the trouble. It seems the best of the best always rise up to that occasion. That's why when I look at Chase Elliott, Corey LaJoie in the top 10, I would see Chase Elliott being more likely to win here at Bristol rather than Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie, if you can avoid the trouble, he'll stay up towards the front. but I know some of the big favorites, they'll be up towards the front, avoiding the trouble as well. Kyle Larson, don't count him out. If he is able to make up positions and not fall a lap down early on in this race, he has a shot of winning this race. That's one of the big things we know about Bristol is you could go a lap down very early. But if we get caution after caution after caution, that helps you stay on the lead lap. And even if, let's just say, worst case scenario, Brad Keselowski, whoever's the leader, put Kyle Larson a lap down within the first 50 laps of the race. If Kyle Larson could stay as that first car on the not on the lead lap, he's gonna get the free pass, get back on the lead lap. So overall, I think there's a lot of drivers that could win this race. The field is very competitive, but I will be looking at one of the past winners to win this race.
Yep, and the Bristol night race will be tonight with 12 drivers advancing to the round of 12, and we'll be seeing the end of 4 drivers' championship runs. But comparing this to Formula One, where Max Verstappen has the championship nearly locked up, like Bristol, this Formula One nighttime race could be the year's most anticipated.
Definitely. And before we get into F1, one comment thoughts on Bristol not having a dirt race. Me personally, it's a concrete track, run the concrete layout. But if NASCAR wants to have a dirt race, put in a dirt track where that's for everyone to decide. Formula One, I think, as you said, one of the most anticipated races of the year. We'll also welcome in the show as well to Joshua Burst from Joshua Burst Motorsports, just I know wrapping up his wash along. And I gotta say, this has to be the most anticipated race of the 2023 year because the probability of Red Bull winning this race now, very low. Max Verstappen, he could have wrapped up this championship for the constructors for Red Bull today if they had a good race. But that's not going to happen. He could go to Japan and potentially wrap up the championship before this race. That may not happen because right now, 11th place. However, there is an investigation going on for impeding cars on pit road and on the track. So he could be starting as low as 16th place. If we have any breaking news on that, we will update it right here on the air. So the first time in a long time, no Red Bull cars in Q3. Just a crazy stat that it was 2018 Sochi last time that had occurred. Isha, I gotta say this. It looked like it was a bit of a sloppy weekend for Red Bull. We know the car, Max wasn't exactly the biggest fan of it, but he was always towards the front in each of the practice sessions. So I thought he'll get it. That did not happen at all. Starting with you, is this the weekend of poor execution by Red Bull? Or is the pressure of potentially wrapping up the Constructors' Championship this weekend starting to lead to some pressure and mistakes on Red Bull's part?
Yeah, Joe, as you mentioned, this has been a tough weekend so far for Red Bull, and the race hasn't even happened yet. When I was watching the practice sessions yesterday and today, I felt like maybe Red Bull was doing something on purpose to, slow themselves down a little bit, not, show all their strength during the practice sessions, and then that they were waiting for qualifying. But after seeing today's qualifying sessions, I am shocked. The way that the performances that we've seen from Red Bull this past season, and then everything we've seen so far this weekend, I think it's just a mixture of, poor execution on the driver's part, but that's also a result of the car not functioning correctly. We heard Max and Checo both on the radio complaining about the car, and we know that the rear tires also did not allow the drivers much control, and we saw Checo spin out as well during the qualifying. So I think it's a bit of the poor execution, it's a little bit of the faulty car, and then on top of that, I think there could also be, to some degree, the pressure of wrapping up the constructors leading to this as well.
Yeah, it's been a really strange weekend because it started in practice one. Max was on the radio saying how the rear of the car didn't feel quite hooked up as well, and he didn't feel like it was 100%. And we all put that down to, we hear it so much from Max in the opening practice sessions as well, as the car's been set up from the simulator data. Max likes to put his own swing on it. And then it got to the end of practice one, and we thought, oh, hello a minute, this is something that isn't right here. Both Red Bulls are complaining. They're both complaining about the same thing. Something's not right here. Got to practice two, and we thought, okay, evening session, all going to be better. And then there was 7 tenths off the pace in race pace Ferrari the fastest, with Red Bull in second, Mercedes third and fourth in terms of race pace data. And we all looked back in the commentary and thought, what has happened? What's happened? They couldn't heat the tyres up. And then they couldn't heat the tyres up on the hard tyres for the long runs. The medium tyres, they could only get 15 or so laps out of before they died off. And the soft tyres were overheating too much. So they're in a right mess. Then we saw in practice 3 this morning, we saw it a little bit yesterday at turn 13 hairpin, Max having a bit of a problem with the rear of the car. Today, however, we saw in practice 3, he did a practice start on the grid. And when he released the clutch, he pulled the shifter and it was like a second later, it was pulling in gear. So he was constantly misgearing and he had a really bad getaway from the line. In between practice 3 and qualifying, they stripped the car at the back. They changed the 2 support rods at the back of the suspension as well. They changed the clutch bi-point settings. They changed the clutch pedal, which is on the back of the steering wheel at the bottom. So that was completely replaced. They remapped it all. And he left the pit lane, looked okay. Then all of a sudden, we have Max in qualifying 1 stopping on track with the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Mercedes, Alonso and Norris, which they're all in investigation for, clearly blocking the track. We've got him then clearly stopping in the pit lane. I said in commentary, doing a Michael Schumacher, a clear cheat, because you don't stop in the fast lane. And it wasn't like he just rolled or anything. He properly stopped and did not let anybody go through. And there's no room. If this happened at Monza, the fast lane's big enough that you can go around the others. But here in Singapore, it's quite a tight fast lane, so nobody could go around him. So he blocked everybody behind him. That's under investigation. And then coming through as well, he blocks Tsunoda. So there's 3 investigations he's waiting for. And then we get into Q2 and he makes a mistake on his first run, loses time. And then on his second run, with 1:20 to go, he twitches in the first corner and that drags him around turn 3, gets very close to the wall exit 13, then loses time in the last chicane at the new 16-17 because it's not a DRS zone. That's where they're strongest, Red Bull. And he loses more time and he ends up 10th fastest. And then Perez locks up, spins at turn 3. That blocks everybody else because Leclerc had a yellow flag. He couldn't do anything. But then Lawson got through. And it was just a massive comedy of errors. I have no idea what's happened with them as well. There's been a few things going around. I know you're going to get to one of them later in the script, but this is a massive off weekend from Red Bull, and it's the Max Verstappen of the 2021 when he was in the championship battle with Hamilton. That's sort of creeping through. The insecurities are starting to come up, and Red Bull, they've changed something. And it's not working, whatever it is. This track's complicated, but there's elements of it all the way around the calendar. And this car has been quick all around the calendar. So what's changed this weekend? We don't know. We can't figure it out. So it's just not hooked up. Whether the drivers aren't hooked up, we don't know. But it's just not working. And it does actually genuinely look like for the first time they're not going to win this season, which means it's probably going to be the best race ever, because the whole thing we've been saying this year, yes, Red Bull have been quick. As I'm seeing Verstappen, he didn't just stop once, he stopped twice in the pit lane, as I'm getting it shown to me on the TV screen in front of me. But Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, they're equally quick, but Red Bull were quicker. So we've got no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, and it could be one of the best races we see in the calendar.
Easily, this looks like it could be one of the best races in the calendar. Dang, I'm thrilled about F1 tomorrow. I think a lot of folks, especially since we know this race sometimes have had 0 lead changes, just thought maybe worth watching the start, maybe zone out. But now, as Adam says, the streak might end tomorrow. He's saying the streak will end tomorrow. We'll find out tomorrow, and we'll talk about it, of course, on what could be a very exciting wrap-up show. Now, Josh, you hit an interesting point about, has something changed? Now, we know there was a FIA technical directive about the flexible wings. After qualifying, Toto Wolff, who of course loves to poke at Red Bull, said, well, maybe it might be something to do with that, because all of a sudden they don't seem to have the pace. Isha, I'll start off with you. After Toto Wolff's comments hinted that the FIA technical directives might be hurting Red Bull, you think that could be the case?
Joe, as you mentioned, we know that Toto Wolff speaks out a lot on his personal opinions, and we know that he's a bit bold and outspoken, especially when he's frustrated. And I think that's really what the case is right now. As far as the FIA technical directive on flexible wings goes for Red Bull, I think the reason why he's saying that is because he's frustrated. On top of that, Red Bull's had such a massive change in their performances this weekend compared to the rest of the season. But overall, I think that that's not really the case as much as it is Toto Wolff just speaking from, being frustrated with Mercedes's performance the past season, and just him in general having some sort of, beef with Red Bull as well.
Absolutely. And I think Toto has been a bit defeatist recently as well, because Ted Kravitz was saying about how there's an interview coming up in the next coming days where he says about the W14, next year's car. And Ted asked him, is it a Red Bull Beta? And he said, well, we've got to be optimistic. There's still a lot of work to do, starting from scratch. So immediately saying no. And I wouldn't say no. I'd say, yes, it's good. Yes, it can be beaten. Toto seems to have lost his sting a little bit in the last couple of weeks. I don't know. It's just a bit weird. Ever since what happened in 2021, it's like and the car in 2022 and 2023, it's like he's just lost his spark a little bit. And I know personally how that feels as well, to lose passion and energy. And it's very hard to get it back. And you have up days and you have bad days. So it's got to be hard for him to sort of have hope for this new car in 2024, the W14. But in terms of the new technical delegates, I've looked at them, I've understood them. It's been what I've been doing over the past couple of weeks as well, because they got released a few weeks ago, and Toto put his foot in the mouth with a Wikipedia comment. Yes, he did, when he said about everything about Max Verstappen. Yeah, Toto, well, to be fair, Helmut Marko put his foot in the mouth and somewhere behind him as well with what he said about Sergio Perez. You don't do that. But this flexi wing situation, I think, is playing a factor in the Red Bull. And I'm saying that because the front end of their car, it's designed by Adrian Newey, as you know, but it is so beautifully detailed. It's got the smallest amount of winglets on any of the cars. It's got 3 veins, whereas most of them have got 4 or 5 on the front wing, the slits between them. And it channels the air into these side pods that are beautifully designed, that sucks the air both underneath the car onto this fantastic Red Bull floor of the ground effect that nobody else can get right. And you change the flexi wings and how much they're allowed to move. Just one little change upsets the entire balance. So I'm wondering if it's playing a factor into it. And considering that it's been Perez and Verstappen saying it's rear grip that they're struggling with, the downforce and the rear diffuser is the parts that it would be most affected by the front wing changes and the flexiness of it. So it doesn't surprise me that this delegates come in and all of a sudden the Red Bull are having problems. In terms of the clutch and the gearbox, this is something that they've been managing throughout the season, because if you remember back to Bahrain, they had temperature issues in the first race. They had to drop back a lot and save the gearbox. And in Saudi Arabia, in qualifying, Verstappen had a failure and had to start 15th on the grid. Remember, he finished second in that race, and it's not out of the possibility at street circuits for Max to come back. But we're waiting on news if he's got a penalty or not. So I think this whole Red Bull situation, it's one small change that's knocked them off the perch. And because they haven't had enough data of race simulation time, because practice 1 and 3 are irrelevant because of it's daylight compared to night. They've only had an hour of running and then of practice time, then going into qualifying. It's not that much. So they'll make changes overnight. They'll try and make the best of it. But I do not see Red Bull winning unless all hell breaks loose tomorrow. And with rain predicted, fast cars at the front, faster cars further back in the field, it could be just an absolute bomb site as to what we're going to get tomorrow for a race. I cannot wait. And I think Max will get a penalty, but we'll get onto that later on as well, because we're waiting on it, because he was in the steward's room an hour ago. And right now, they're talking with everything from the Q1 incident, with everybody backing up in the last sector. So it's chaos at the moment, and I feel for the stewards, because they're going to have a long night tonight and then a longer night tomorrow trying to analyze that Grand Prix.
There's just something about motorsports under the lights, under the night sky. It just seems to bring the crazy out. Boy, 2 Saturday night races. Well, Saturday night for the US. I know Sunday night over there, but this is just going to be insane for Liam Lawson. This could be a very memorable race for him because he had an outstanding effort. Unfortunately for Red Bull, he was the driver to knock off Max Verstappen out of the top 10. But Liam Lawson getting up to the top 10 in that AlphaTauri, he out qualified Yuki Tsunoda. If this is just astounding to me. If he finishes 8th place or better, or 9th with the fastest lap bonus, he will have more points than Yuki Tsunoda from the entire season. Now, Daniel Ricciardo, of course, he done a couple of races. He is out with an injury, expected to come back, and everyone assume he will be back again to finish off the season. But Josh, starting with you, should Red Bull be looking at Liam Lawson now for a future seed? Because what he's done is impressive, and thus this jeopardizes Daniel Ricciardo's return to a full-time ride.
I'm going to say this. Perez is gone. He won't be at Red Bull next year. They say he's got a contract. Don't believe it. We've said that before. He's gone. Danny Ricciardo will be alongside Max Verstappen next year, and it'll be Yuki Tsunoda alongside Liam Lawson. That is what we've been discussing in the commentary. Jess has said it as well. And I believe it as well, because Liam Lawson, you absolutely cannot let Liam Lawson get away from you. He has tamed the untamable car across the last 3 weekends. He got into, what was it? Yeah, first race qualifying, it was a wet one. We don't count it. That was his first time in the car. Don't count that. Count the race where he passed Max Verstappen in very wet conditions. Count that. Count how he finished 14th in his debut. The next weekend at Monza, finished 13th, got into Q2. This weekend, got into Q3, out-qualified Max Verstappen as well, and then had pace. Liam Lawson, I think, deserves a full-time seat in Formula One, and he deserves it at AlphaTauri. Danny Ricciardo, I can see why he came back, but everyone was questioning why. Why is he back? Why is he coming in? It's quite clear it's going to be Ricciardo alongside Perez. What I would do if I was Red Bull, but then again, they're idiots and they don't like to do this, is I would share the car for the remainder of the season, because what we've got, Japan, Qatar, America, Mexico, Brazil, United States, and Vegas. That's 7 races, and 8 counting today, really. So Lawson takes the car for half the races that are left, and Ricciardo does the other half. That way, you've got 2 drivers who are match fit, ready for next season, and then you drop Perez, because I know Perez is a great driver, but Red Bull and him are not getting along at the moment. So you drop Perez, you get Danny Rick back in the car, then he's got race experience, Lawson's got race experience, and go from there. Because next year, we know the AlphaTauri is going to move more in line with the Red Bull. They're going to have pretty much the same car, as much as the regulations allow. They're going to be rebranded to the Hugo Boss Red Bull racing team, whatever it is. So they're going to get a full-on experience. It's going to be a factory team. And then you've got Lawson and Tsunoda there, and you've got Verstappen and Ricciardo there, and it works perfectly. So just get on with it, because I think Lawson really surprised me today. And I think he surprised Christian Horner a little bit on the pit wall, didn't he? Horner looked like he'd been stung by a bee at the end of Q2 when Lawson got through. And the graphics confusing, because I thought it was Tsunoda for a time, because Tsunoda was the first one. So no, it was Lawson, and well done for him. Great job opportunity for him starting 10th tomorrow.
Now, Joe, I know before I answer the question, there's some comments. Yes, I just subscribed to Isha's channel. Thank you so much. And they also say I would put Lawson in Red Bull, Checo and Danny Rick in AlphaTauri. That's also an interesting mix-up. Yeah, Adam agrees with that too. And this is something that I have been saying on my channel as well, that Liam Lawson has been doing an incredible job. The performances that we've seen from him since Daniel Ricciardo's been out, he has been doing so well. And he so far has outperformed Daniel Ricciardo since Daniel Ricciardo came back into the season. And he has also sort of been outperforming Yuki Tsunoda as well. So I think it's not just going to be Red Bull that's looking out for Liam Lawson, but I think that other teams will be keeping an eye out for him as well, in the future, a few years in the future. But I think we're definitely going to be seeing Liam Lawson driving full time for Formula One. Josh, I think that the mix up that you came up with, seeing Sergio Perez out, I don't think he's going to be with Red Bull starting next season. And I think that we're most likely going to see Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen together for Red Bull. And then, as you said, Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson for AlphaTauri. I think that's the most likely combo that we'll be seeing.
It's going to be really interesting. The Red Bull silly season, that's probably going to be the hottest silly season in Formula One. Formula One, though, I got to say, Daniel Ricciardo, great personality. Fans love him. And that has to be so bittersweet to see the car that you normally drive. They're doing great, but you're not behind the wheel. It's just one of those deals. We know Formula One is such a cutthroat business where everyone's just trying to get 1 out of 20 seats. It's going to be really interesting to see what Liam Lawson can do this race weekend. Now, this grid, very much full of potential winners. And it's so weird to say that everyone in the top 10, and I'm talking about Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso, they're all looking for their first win, and we're 15 races into the year. Leclerc, Lando Norris is in the upgraded McLaren, so he could potentially do it. George Russell just missed out on the pole. He's the last driver to win that was not in a Red Bull. Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon, they both have wins. Fernando Alonso has won here. Granted, there's a big asterisk because of how he got the win here. And as you mentioned,
no,
Josh,
don't.
You don't want to bring it up, but we know, as you mentioned, Josh, potentially rain. Now, it's supposed to stop before the race, but that's a forecast. It seems like anything can happen. Isha, out of all the drivers, which 3 drivers stand out to be potential podium finishers?
Joe, this is a bit of a trick question. Had this been any other week, I would have obviously said Max Verstappen would have been up there. But this weekend, I'm excited because now there's going to be more diversity on the podium, I think. I think that we've got a good chance with the 2 Ferraris. We could see Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc up there, or at least one of them. And I would have also said Lando Norris. But after seeing George Russell's performance today, as you mentioned, he did an incredible job as well. We know that the 2 Mercedes were performing well in Singapore looking at this weekend, but he's been outperforming Lewis Hamilton, or he outperformed him in the qualifying session, and he came in 2nd position. So I think he's really going to be giving Carlos Sainz, a run tomorrow. It's going to be a good fight to see who's on the podium. But for my top 3 right now, I think I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell.
Yeah, just been given the news that we've got a reprimand for Sargent for impeding Lance Stroll and a $5,000 fine for Williams for failing to inform him that there was a car behind him. Now, that is pretty much what could also happen to Max Verstappen for impeding Tsunoda, but in terms of stopping in the pit lane and the Q1 incident, that could change around. So we'll keep you updated with that, as well as more are coming in as the stewards get busy. So top 3, it's kind of like a pick a winner then, isn't it? And I don't know, I'm staying around for that. So I'll sort of say what I'm thinking is the top 3. My gut is telling me that they're not going to give penalties that much, so it could be fines. If Ferrari don't start on pole position, by the way, goes to Magnussen, because there it is. Look, so you got Sainz, he was involved in that train. So was Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton. So if they all get penalties from Q1, Magnussen takes pole position, and then Alonso is involved in it too. So that puts Ocon P2, Hulkenberg P3, and Lawson P4. Now, for that to work out over the race distance, they're going to need to be planning the safety car strategies, where it's 100% chance of safety car at this track. So you plan that into your strategies somewhere along the line. 50% of them have happened at the first 10 laps, and then 50% after that as well, obviously. But it's in terms of the percentage that they work out. So my top 3 for the race are going to be Lando Norris taking the race win, Fernando Alonso P2, and I'm going to put Nico Hulkenberg getting 3rd. And the reason I put Hulkenberg 3rd for his first ever podium is because his race pace data was faster than Magnussen's, and Magnussen tends to not have his tires as kindly lit as what we see with Hulkenberg. So I see that sort of a situation. I think it's going to be a very crazy race, and that's just me predicting it if we have the penalties for the top 5 in that race. So if we don't get penalties, I'm going to go with Sainz from Norris from Leclerc, a 1, 2, 3 on the podium. But there's so many things going on. The documents we've got from race control, there's around about 12 drivers that are being called to the stewards for one reason or another. So there's loads to talk about here in Singapore tonight, and there really is a lot to go forward. But there's 2 sets of 3s, depending on what way the stewards decide to go about the blockings in qualifying.
These top 3 predictions are just very interesting. Norris, Hamilton, Russell. That would be huge. Sainz, Hamilton, Russell. Russell seems to be the consistent one there. I got to think, I have to lean towards Russell. He knows how to win. I don't think he's going to have the pressure of trying to get my first win, granted his first win of the year. He's won before. I think he can handle it. Lando, I think he'll do good, but I just feel that McLaren still seems to be one step behind the Mercedes. 3rd place, I think that's where Sainz will come in. Ferrari, which sort of leads to this question for y'all. This course has changed from 22 to 19 corners. Sainz will be leading this group. We know Ferrari has the unfortunate reputation of not exactly having the best execution on race day. After the race, Danica Patrick asked Carlos Sainz, do they have the race pace? And Sainz said that is unknown. Now Sainz, 5th place at Zandvoort. Then he got 3rd place podium in Italy, Monza. Isha, can Carlos Sainz win if Ferrari did something Red Bull didn't do today, and that's execute a flawless day at the race?
Now, Joe, as you've mentioned, we know that Ferrari doesn't always have the best overall race pace. They do great when it comes to qualifying and single lap race paces, but when it comes to the whole race, they do struggle a little bit. But if we're channeling some of the positive energy that we saw last race weekend in Monza, I think that Carlos Sainz has a really good shot of winning. We saw him not only start off in pole position at Monza, but then also compete with Max Verstappen to hold on to that position. And even though Max Verstappen ended up taking it from him, it was still an incredible fight. And then also at the last few laps of Monza, him and Charles Leclerc fighting, that was an insane Ferrari battle as well. So I think that we've got a good shot of seeing Carlos Sainz execute a flawless day tomorrow. So I'm going to go with yes. I think Carlos Sainz will be the winner tomorrow.
As I said, with the penalties that could be applied, there's 2 ways to go about it. But I think if all is well and they leave it alone, I think Sainz has a very good chance. I mean, he's already done something that hasn't been done before, which is out-qualify Charles Leclerc at this track. Leclerc previously had always been faster than his teammate at Singapore, including when he started on pole position in 2019 ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Vettel, crucially on that day, overtook him, and that was his last Grand Prix win. But I think we're going to see Sainz. He's on a roll. He wants to get back from Monza, where it got away from him, and he led, what was it, about 9-10 laps at Monza. This time he hasn't got Max Verstappen that close to him. And I think Verstappen's going to find it very difficult to get through. Remember Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, round 2 of the season. Max started 15th, gearbox penalty. He fought back to 2nd, and by around about half distance, Red Bull were 1-2 in the race, and they were 30 to 40 seconds ahead of everybody else. This is not the track that this will happen. Singapore is tight. It's twisty. It's like Monaco, but you can overtake. So this track is not going to be a Jeddah. It's a proper street track, and Max is going to struggle to overtake here. So we're going to see a very, very close fight race, and I reckon Sainz will have the lead if he starts on pole position, because everything's provisional. We got the qualifying results, I'm sure, Joe, you did, because you wrote them out for the Grid Network graphics here, and it was provisional, and at the bottom it said subject to FIA decisions. So it was really, really bizarre, and it wasn't even signed, so it was getting everything crazy. But I hope for Ferrari just do something good. Don't forget, though, one stat I said in commentary before I throw it back to you. In 1988, McLaren went undefeated, and the only team to defeat them that year was Ferrari, and they got it with a 1-2 at Monza, Berger ahead of Alesi. So, Alboreto. So anything's possible. Anything is possible.
Anything's possible, especially with Red Bull outside the top 10. As I mentioned earlier, that hasn't happened since 2018 in Sochi. And only once has the winner come from outside the top 3 starting positions. Again, that was for Fernando. Let's not talking about how that happened because we know how that happened with Crashgate, so let's not go there. But 5 times this race out of the 13 run-ins, 0 lead changes. One stop strategy that tends to make the most sense because that'll make it harder for everyone to gain time, gain positions, because pit road, you're losing about 28 seconds in this track. And all 13 races have had at least one safety car period. Josh, starting with you, does the focus on strategy on the timing of a safety car take precedence? Or can the teams really rely on the safety car period because you may not see it after all, but history's shown you might.
Renault did this in 2008 to bring it up a little bit. They knew that if they had a safety car at precisely the right time, they could get a one-stop fuel in for Alonso and get him to the win. So that was an artificial safety car. But then the safety car came out later on in the race for a second time because Sutil put it in the barrier under the tunnel section. And if you look at it, quite a lot of the safety car periods over the years have been caused by that tunnel section. That's now gone this year. So it's quite a sort of unknown as to whether or not we're going to have a safety car period or not. We've had a safety car come out in 2015 because a man just decided to take a walk down the road, and that was the only safety car we saw in the race. So it does come in very weird ways at this track, but I would bank on a safety car here because it is the most tiring, the most enduring race on the calendar. So yeah, I would definitely bank on that one.
I agree with Josh here. I also say that I would be banking on a safety car definitely coming up for tomorrow's race because especially with the starting lineup or the grid that we're going to be seeing tomorrow, as long as there's no changes for penalties and stuff, it's going to be a really tough race. It's going to be really surprising. And I think that a safety car is definitely going to be out there. So I think that the teams at this point should be strategizing what their plans would be if a safety car is out. And just, in general, coming up with as many options as they can because the race is going to be a real shocker tomorrow. That's what I'm expecting.
Should be a very exciting race. Of course, that's going to be 5 a.m. Pacific, so very early wake-up call for me. 8 a.m. Eastern, Formula One Singapore Grand Prix, sponsored by Singapore Airlines, the final race of the weekend for the Grid Ranking Series. But Josh, before we let you go, we have that notorious question, pick a winner. Who do you think is going to win the Formula One race? And while you're here, who do you think is going to win NASCAR as well?
Oh,
both of them are very tricky.
You were going on about Truex earlier on, not getting through, so I'll throw my hat with Truex's ring, the normal series champion. Okay, who's going to win Formula One? Yeah, we've got to wait on penalties, haven't we? So I will go. Carlos Sainz will win. I don't think they'll get a penalty for the pole sitter. It'd be very, very unusual for that to happen. And then if Max gets off scot-free, there'll be outcry. So I'll go Carlos Sainz will win.
Carlos Sainz, that right now appears to be the best choice. It's going to be very interesting. Of course, we're going to have a recap on Grid Life wrap-up. Joshua, thank you so much for your time. And Isha, the other big race we got to talk about, Supercar Series and the return of the Sandown 500.
Yes, Joe, we've got the Repco Supercars Series with one race this weekend, but it is the Sandown 500 race. So Will Brown took the pole and his teammate Brody Kostecki was second. Cam Waters and Will Davison are making it an all-Ford second row. Brock Feeney is in fourth and his teammate Shane Van Gisbergen is 19th. So Joe, considering this is a single race with 2 drivers per team, could this reduce SVG's disadvantage?
I believe it does because one of the big things just about all year long, 2 races, 3 races, shorter distances. So if you have a poor qualifying effort, you're going to need to rely on some luck, strategy working out for you. For Shane Van Gisbergen, this race weekend, you got the full 500-kilometer race ahead of you. A lot more room for opportunities when we have safety cars to adjust your strategy, get on a different strategy, to climb your way towards the front. When the second driver takes over too, that's a great opportunity to start looking at, okay, what are we doing? Talking to the team, the engineers. That's what I think makes this so unique with the Supercar Series to have two drivers for a race of this distance. This allows the drivers to talk to the teams outside the race car, see for themselves what everyone's doing. Just adds that new element. I'm really a huge fan of this race being back. Overall, I think when it comes to Shane Van Gisbergen, I think he's going to easily work his way to the top 10. I think he'll finish in the top 10. Surprised he has not won this race yet, but that's just the way it goes. This is definitely one of the races on the bucket list for him to go out there, try to get the win, and I think this is the great opportunity for him to do that this year.
Yeah, Joe, and we only have 4 past winners of the Sandown 500 in the field today. Now, Waters has the best starting position in 3rd place, and Ford are hopeful for a good weekend. Chevrolet is leading the battle with more wins than Ford, and the last time Ford won was in Townsville. So, Joe, with one 500-kilometer race, could this race play into Ford's hands?
I think so, especially for Cam Waters. Cam Waters, he has to feel pretty good considering he knows how to get the job done here at the Sandown. Big thing, though, he has to have that good fast pace because if we go quite a ways without a caution flag and they got the good pace, I could see him up towards the front, staying in a reach or ahead of the 2 Coca-Cola Chevrolet Camaros that are starting in the front row, put himself in a position to win the race. If for some reason he does not have the race pace, it could be a very long race for Ford. The big thing is having that race pace. I think that's going to be the key element in trying to get a win at this race. In the chat room, I see Adam, Sandown 500. Historic race after that, time for Bathurst, and of course, we'll have a special pre-race for Bathurst.
Yep, and Sunday early morning on the East Coast will be the Supercars race and 9 p.m. Pacific for the West Coast. And it's a busy weekend of racing starting tonight with NASCAR at Bristol at 6 p.m. Eastern. Supercars we've got at midnight, 9 p.m. Pacific, and Formula One in the morning. We also have IMSA at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so that grid wrap-up show will be the conclusion of IMSA. And now we have time for our favorite segment, Pick a Winner.
Pick a winner. We heard Josh's comments. Isha, starting with you for Formula One. No Red Bulls in the top 10. Who are you going to win that race?
Joe, in the past, I have picked non-Red Bull drivers, and I have never won a point on that. But this time, I'm feeling hopeful. I think this is going to be a lucky choice. I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz.
Carlos Sainz. He's on the pole right now. I think he has a great opportunity. As much as I want to say Lando Norris just because he's come so close, I know the McLaren team and Lando will be hugely excited if that occurs. I just don't think I could go there. I think I'm going to make it an all Ferrari. Carlos Sainz getting the win. First of the year, and he'll be singing Smooth Operator all night long in Singapore. Now, when it comes to NASCAR, the other night race that we got, going to be chaotic. We're going to have potentially 3 chaotic races. What a fun weekend. For Bristol, NASCAR, who do you see taking the win?
I am going to go with Christopher Bell for NASCAR.
Christopher Bell. It will be amazing if he wins. That'll be 3 playoff rounds in a row, counting last year and this year. He won the last race to advance in the next round. That'll be an amazing feat for that team. Overall, I think I'm going to go with a driver in the playoffs. Hasn't won yet, but he will in this race. Denny Hamlin. He's been so close quite a bit. He's going to get the job done. And of course, we're going to discuss NASCAR, Supercars, and F1 tomorrow on the Wrap-Up Show. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs because you can subscribe, but that bell icon, very important so you don't miss any of our programs. If you want to give a thanks to Josh, Isha, members of the Grid Network team, buy me a coffee or the YouTube Super Chat. You can also do through thanks if you're not watching us live. And our Patreon subscribers, Colin, Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much. We're getting to the tracks. We're interviewing drivers. If you want to see more on-track coverage, driver interviews, please invest in the Grid Network. This will help us get to that goal. And especially once we hit $500 a month, that will be a great start to 2024. I see Adam with his pick of winners. Carlos Sainz, Brad Keselowski, Shane Van Gisbergen, the number 7 Porsche at Indianapolis for IMSA. Overall, we got an exciting race weekend. Don't miss out right here on the Grid Network. For Isha Azim, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.